Good evening. Welcome to The Hardest Game. My name is Ben Doughty, and I'm delighted to be joined for a very special episode this evening. First of all, by former British, European, and Commonwealth Super Bantamweight champion Esham Brown Sugar Pickering. Welcome. You can say something at that point. That's
Hello,
cool.
how are we doing?
Yeah, that's
Hello
nice
there.
one, Shug. And also delighted to be joined for the first time on any kind of conversation by John Buster Keaton, former British Cruiserweight champion. Thanks for coming, John, especially at late notice, mate.
No worries, no worries.
And I'm also delighted to be joined by former pro boxer, trainer of champions, general all-round Sheffield legend, Glyn Rhodes. Welcome, sir.
Nice to meet you all, guys.
Well done, nice one.
Now, lads, there's been a lot of talk recently that obviously the film Giant, the Naseem Hamed story, ostensibly the Naseem Hamed story, although I think it was just as much the Engle story, it hit the cinemas in the UK last week. And there's been a lot of consternation about the people talking about the relationship and the severed alliance between Naz and Brendan. Before we get into the reality that all of you gentlemen saw in varying degrees at different times in your boxing lives, can I ask you, I'll go with Glyn first. What did you make of the film initially, assuming you've seen it already?
Ben, I'm sorry, but before we start, can we give a big shout out to a kid from Sheffield who just went to New York and won the world title? Dalton Smith. Big shout out
Brilliant.
to Dalton.
Loved it. Love that.
Wicked.
Yeah, well done,
it.
Dalton. So, I've not actually seen the movie. I've not been to see it. I'm not sure whether I'll go and see it. I probably will, but I'm not in a rush to go and see it.
So, okay, before I get the other guys' views on what they saw, tell me what your reluctance is based on, Glyn, in terms of not being gagging to see the film on a big screen.
Because everything that's in the film, I lived it. I lived that era. You know, I met Naz when Naz was 7 when he started. I was 20. I stayed at Brendan's till I was 33. So I actually, all the era that we're talking about here, I actually lived it. You know, I seen John and Esham. I seen all them guys coming through. So seeing Naz coming through from a 7-year-old to an adult. So I kind of I've got my own opinion of what I think happened and what I know happened. So, like I said, I will go and see the movie, but I'm not in a big rush to go and see it.
Okay, John Buster Keaton, you told me you have seen it and you were actually in it in some of the scenes. What was your opinion of the overall result?
I thought it was good. I thought it was a decent portrayal, really. There's some stuff, obviously, we're like just fantasy made up. And stuff like the cars and stuff. I know it's trivial, but it made a difference to me because I was like, oh, he never had that, and that never happened.
Yeah.
Some of the scenes, there was truth behind more or less everything, but like portrayed in a different way, if that makes sense.
Yes. Brown Sugar, your response, initial response.
Yeah, I don't want to go on too long, Ben. But I got there in March '96, and I think the film covered mostly from the later days. I mean, they had a bit. I mean, maybe half an hour was his early days, maybe a bit longer. But when I got there, I struggled. I enjoyed the film, but I struggled with what I was watching a little bit. And I had mixed emotions, and to be honest with you, I really was mixed. I was like, you know, that was a John and Dominic film for me.
Yeah.
You know, that's coming from them. Obviously, the producer and the director, or whatever, they've looked at past footage and bits and bats, but they don't know what went off in the gym. They don't know what went off. So, you know, what they've been told is from what's going off in the gym must be come from a good source or a source from that angle.
One thing that interested me, when I saw the sparring scene, which turns ugly between Brendan and Naz, who is a professional at this point and is a fighter of some level already, I figured that was definitely a Hollywood type device. And then John Keaton told me, no, that happened. He said it was actually uglier than that, and Ryan Rhodes was involved too. Go on, John.
Yeah, it was. It were started off as a bit of a slanging match between Naz and Brendan, and Ryan as well. And I can't remember the exact detail, but it was something like Naz was saying, "You wouldn't have been able to stand with me in your prime.
Yeah.
Never mind now." And Naz and Brendan were like sort of saying, "You're arrogant and you're bombastic," and you know what I mean, in fights. And Brendan went out at gym and he come back in, and he had this. All I remember, he had this big yellow itchy mohair jumper on. It was like a yellow jumper. It was massive, and these old gloves. And he got in ring and started body sparring with Naz, and instead of having a break at end of round, he then took on Ryan, and they were just like sparring with Ryan and Naz, and it started to get heavy. Naz started to land like body shots and banging him on his arms and everything. And we were all shouting for Brendan at ringside. We were all like, "Come on, Brendan!" They were saying, "Shut up, you bastards! Keep training." You know what I mean? He was telling us to like ignore what were happening. And then
what year was that, Key?
I ain't got a clue. I looking
was
back,
he champion? Was he champion?
I think he was European champion.
Oh yes, before I got there and that.
Yeah, I think he was European. But it weren't very nice to watch.
Did Naz take into him then?
It were banging Brendan. I'm telling you, he were banging him on.
Brendan would have been about 54 at the time,
I reckon.
Yeah.
And he sort of staggered out at ring, Brendan, I remember, and like went across road, and then Alma door flung open, and Alma come in and went, "What the bleeding hell's going on?" You know what I mean? He's in a right state. And Brendan told us he ended up like in Bath with Epsom salts. That was his favourite thing, wasn't it? Get the Epsom salts.
Yeah.
He went in Bath for about half a day or something. Alma went mad. He was covered in bruises. So that actually happened. But
that's interesting because you might have thought they'd hand it up, and it's good to hear that. I don't mean it's good to hear that Naz took liberties with Brendan in the ring, but it's good to hear that it was authentic. Glyn, everybody talks about the Engle style, and certainly the set narrative in British boxing circles, hardcore and casual alike, is that Harold Graham was really the author of that unorthodoxy and the kind of way of breaking the rules from the traditional stand-up boxing that most people, certainly in the UK, were espousing at that time. Do you feel it was Harold Graham and that he shaped that whole the several generations of the St Thomas lads, or is it not that simple?
Well, Ben, I was at Brendan's a year before Errol arrived. And, there were a few fighters in Sheffield. I had this chat on Facebook probably a couple of days ago. There were Mick Mills, Chris Walker, John Kelly. There were fighters in Sheffield, but there weren't much boxing to speak of in Sheffield until Bomber come. Then Bomber came, he won the ABAs, and then he started boxing the way that Bomber boxed. And then Brendan, must have thought, well, this is great. So everybody talks about it being the Brendan Engle style of boxing. But Mick Mills, Chris Walker, John Kelly, Lloyd Stewart, none of these guys were doing that until Bomber got there. And then once Bomber arrived, everybody's doing it and still are. So I'm not saying Brendan didn't develop the style, but until Bomber arrived in Sheffield, 1976 or something, nobody were doing that style of boxing at all.
Because you were there from 1976, weren't you? You made your pro debut in 1979, but you started at the gym a few years earlier than that, didn't you, Glyn?
Yeah, straight from school, straight into Brendan's. Best thing he ever did. I think a lot of this, what we're all discussing at the moment with the movie with Naz and Brendan, is very, very sad as well. Because if you imagine, you've got two kids from Sheffield, obviously Brendan's Irish and Naz lived in a shop up the road. When you think about what both of them did together, it's an amazing journey. So for it to end up the way it ended up, like here we are now, I think it's very, very sad. And obviously Brendan's not here to defend himself. But, I had my ups and downs with Brendan as well, like many fighters have. I'm in the same position myself. I've had fighters leave me, and we've fell out and made up, and you've got fighters that sometimes it's a dog's game, honest it is. But I just think the story with Brendan and Naz, how it's all turned out, is very, very sad, because it's a remarkable story. Honest it is. For anybody on the outside looking at what they did, you got two people from Sheffield. I remember once I got to New York, and as we were going through Times Square, I saw a massive picture of Naseem Hamed. It might have probably been when he boxed Kevin Kelly. And I remember thinking to myself, bloody hell, this is a kid from Winkerbank, and he's in Times Square. How good is that? So that's why I'm saying it's all a little bit sad. It could have all been a little bit more different, to tell you the truth.
We've got a question on the screen, but to the people tuning in tonight, please forgive me if I don't take all the comments, because I've got three major boxing faces on at the minute, and I need to sort of pay attention to them. But a gentleman has said, can you enlighten us as to why Harold Bomber Graham got kicked out of the gym? See, I didn't understand it was him being kicked out. I thought he left, but I don't really. You would know more about that than I do, Glyn.
Again, it's, Brendan's not here to defend himself, and we all hear why it was. Probably down to money again. It's usually money. In this game, why trainers and managers and boxing, it's usually money. And so I would imagine, it was a money thing. But the difference with me, when I retired, I never retired and then left Brendan. Although me and Brendan banged heads a lot of times, I never fell out with Brendan and left. I actually retired. And then what happened is, when I opened my gym, what happens is, like's happened with me on many occasions, and Esham as well, a new gym opens in the town, and fighters leave and come to you, or go back and come. And that's what happened with me. I opened a gym in Sheffield after retiring, shook hands with Brendan, thanked him for everything that he'd done. He actually came and helped me, him and Richard Caban, the MP, and had a look at my premises at the time. It only went sour with me and Brendan when fighters started leaving his gym.
Including Harold. Including Harold Graham, right?
Yeah, including Harold. And another thing that seemed to upset a lot of people at the time, many years later, Billy Hardy, when he boxed Naz, Billy Hardy came to my gym and said, he's seen a girl in Sheffield. He's all right if he trains at my gym. I wasn't actually training Billy. He was, he got his own trainer. He was just using my gym. But that seemed to upset a lot of people, including Naz. He quite upset that, me being a former gym mate, that I'd let his next opponent train in the gym. But, I felt it was a privilege to have Billy Hardy in my gym. I was just starting out in the game. I'd not been going very long myself. And all of a sudden, you got a guy called Billy Hardy, who was a good fighter, wanting to train with me, and Harold Graham, one or two other fighters. So I'm not going to say no. And so, it upset a lot of people that certain fighters came to my gym, and the rest is history.
Esham, one of the things that Naseem Hamed said when he finally left Brendan, I believe 1999, the Wayne McCulloch fight in 1999, I think it was the last time they worked together. And obviously the alliance looked to be on its last legs all during the build-up to that fight. Naz said when he got with Emmanuel Stewart, and there was a guy called Suarez. He had like a Oscar Suarez.
Yeah.
When he was being trained by Oscar Suarez and sometimes Manny Stewart, he said, "I've never had one-to-one coaching in my life." He said at St Thomas's at the Engle gym, all I ever did was a set routine. I've done the same thing since I was a kid. Same thing everybody did: the lines, the bag circuits, the body sparring. He said, "I've never had one-to-one coaching." How accurate an assessment do you think that would have been, Esham?
Well, I can only go by what I've seen. People can say what they want and tell me stuff, but what I seen is, when I got there in March '96, I never seen Naz for 10 weeks. He just knocked out Said Lawal with the first shot.
Yeah.
I've seen Naz for 10 weeks in my first 10 weeks in Sheffield. Because I went down and spoke to Brendan, and he wanted me to move down. So I moved down within 3 weeks. And then from there, I never seen Naz for 10 weeks. And then he come in the gym, he somersaulted the ropes, and he stayed in the ring for an hour and a half and just bashed everybody up, body sparring. And then
Yeah.
he hit pads with John Engle for about 15 rounds. And I'm not exaggerating. That's how it went. And what he did for the next 6 weeks, maybe 5 weeks, he did that every night. Just body sparred every day and hit pads with John Engle 15 rounds. I never seen him in the morning when I train in the morning. Never seen him.
One of the things Naz has said, now he's been speaking about the film, because his take on it, although people have said, oh, you shouldn't speak ill of the dead and Brendan is not around to defend himself, Naz's take on it is, listen, I've been quiet for years, I've been a recluse practically, and now there's a movie which I didn't know was being made initially about my life, it represents me, and this is my time to set the record straight from my side. But one of the things he said was the real credit for training him all those years should go to John Engle. I'd like to ask you all about that, to assess that comment, but start with you, John Buster Keaton. He says that John Engle deserves most of the credit for working with him all those years.
John was more like a friend to Naz from my point of view. He was sort of like his brother. If Brendan was the father figure, he saw John Engle as like an elder brother, and John did spend a lot of time with him because Naz hit that hard. Brendan always said, "You're breaking my bleeding hands. You're breaking my bleeding shoulders." And Brendan would always like, he'd got pains in his shoulders and his elbows. So John did a lot of pad work. Brendan sort of, he were always in Naz's ear. And they always had this code, as what I can remember. It was just like a close relationship. And Naz doted on every word, as far as I can remember.
See, that's the thing, fellas. A guy like Tony Burns, the legendary head coach of Repton for many years, and I worked under him as a coach back in 2005 for a few years. I never saw him do a lot of hands-on coaching, and obviously he was an older man by that point. But it was just the presence he had and the respect he had, from the lads, and the nurturing effect that he had. So maybe that's underestimated. Just because a guy's not doing pads all the time and doesn't seem to be getting his hands dirty and getting involved, it doesn't mean that he's not essential to the fighter, maybe. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I can speak from, sorry, boys, I can speak from my own experiences with Naz. And now my elbows and my shoulders are smashed to bits myself. I trained Naz for a short time when he was waiting for that trainer, Oscar Suarez, to come over. I trained him in my gym, and I also trained him at Sheffield Wednesday football ground because he hired a room at Wednesday ground. And I used to meet him every day at 1:30 and mainly just do pads. Honest, he's the hardest punching boxer I have ever took on the pads in my life. Honest.
Yeah.
The first time I took him on the pads, I was in shock that a guy so small can punch so hard. So I can verify the kid's power. He's unbelievable.
I wonder where it came from too, because I remember Mick Carney, the Fitzroy Lodge coach, talking on a Naz documentary once, and he said it's strange because he doesn't seem to get any power from his feet, which is what you're told is the rudiments of boxing and punching. And he seems to do everything wrong, but at the same time, he's such a bone-breaking puncher. He seemed to stiffen his body on impact, right? He'd launch himself into the air with some of these shots, and he seemed to stiffen at the moment that he connected. What was? I mean, he said it was a gift from God. By the way, I mean, what do you think it was that?
Naz, I think it came from his legs. Naz's thighs were, I would have light heavyweight, like super middleweight, light heavyweight at that time. When just before Naz, like when he boxed for European, and Naz's thighs were the same size as mine.
Tree trunks.
You know what I mean? It like thin waist, massive thighs, like Mike Tyson.
I disagree. I disagree, guys. What it was for me, he did have big legs, don't get me wrong. But what it was for me, if you listen to the film, they give clarification of this. He wasn't a puncher before he was 16, was he, Glyn? He couldn't punch.
I can remember. No.
Never stopped nobody. Never stopped nobody till he was 16.
Go on.
I know he did you've heard about the blows, haven't you? You've heard about the blows and his footwork. And Brendan taught me how to punch. That's one thing Brendan did. Brendan was not a hands-on trainer. I want a puncher. I had about 8 knockouts on the trot when I won the title because I was working on my power. I was a fast, sharp boxer. I did neglect that a little bit, and I was relying more on power when I started knocking people out. But the reason he was a good puncher because he worked on it over the years, and it come because he was not a natural puncher. It come later in his later years, and I believe he worked on it. I mean, if you believe in God, he's going to say, it's all from God. But he worked on that. He worked on that. That's what I believe. And it took time, and it's progressed. And obviously, he's took it to the next level. It was one of the hardest punches, featherweights of all time. But he definitely worked on that for me.
His balance,
Glyn,
balance were
go
phenomenal.
on, John. You go first.
His balance were phenomenal. It was like
everything.
It was like
John, honestly, he blew my mind in that gym. I've never seen anything. I used to sit there after training. He used to come in a little bit late, and he did have his one-on-one training, but it's because everybody else was there, maybe. That was the problem. Because he hit past 15, 20 rounds, and he body sparred, and he hit bags. But that's all he did. I never seen him do a groundwork. I never seen him do anything. No constructive training. It was just...
He didn't like running, did he, lads? He did not like running. He said,
I think he did do a bit of running on a treadmill, I believe. But I never seen him.
I think Tom Bradley used to go with him a little bit. I mean, Glyn, can you remember when you were still there? Definitely. When he had some like horsehair raised gloves, and they were rock hard. They were rock hard on end. They'd like gone off. And he used to wear these gloves, and he used to smash you. Absolutely smash you to bits with them gloves on. I mean, he were only young then. I think they were about 6 or 8 ounce old Cleto raised gloves. What we're all saying, they'd gone hard. Oh, Brendan, don't take them off. Leave him alone.
Let him wear those gloves.
I don't know how he jabbed 6'2", 6'3" fighters over and over again. And made him couldn't hit him. I didn't get it. Harry could do it with bigger guys. I didn't get it.
He was a great fighter. He was a great fighter. And
he was a great fighter, Glyn. And I think, unfortunately, the narrative against him, certainly in online boxing chat circles, is this overhyped flash in the pan who lost to the first decent world class fighter he faced, which is such outrageous falsehood. Naz was the best featherweight in the world for about 5 years.
He beat so many guys that should have gone on to do great things, mate. Daniel Alicia would have done an amazing career, and he stopped him in his tracks, and he got up off the floor and ruined him. There were so many fighters, he ruined the careers. He ruined
and also, he beat every major belt holder during his
He won them all, beat every champion.
Yes, that's sure. So, and when you look at most British world champions over the last 30 odd years or whatever, there's not that many of them that can lay unambiguous claim to being the #1 in the world beyond argument for a certain period of years. Naz was that. And unfortunately, because that kind of style and profile and swagger and outrageous cockiness, because it only works when you're winning, when he was humbled a little bit, and I think the crucial thing is he did not really come back from that. He had the fight against Manuel Calvo, which the crowd booed and all the rest of it, and some of them left early. And then he kind of faded away into retirement, never actually announced it. I think to be loved by the British public en masse, he needed a second act. Even if he didn't need one personally, either financially or for his own fulfillment, I think the public needed him to do that. And that is why people talk him down today and forget what an amazing fighter he was. Yeah?
But Ben, unless he'd have beat Marco Antonio Barrera, I don't think anything would have changed. He had the fight against Calvo, his last fight. But I personally don't think, no matter how many fights he would have had after that, if he'd not had a rematch with Barrera and beat Barrera, we'd have been exactly in the same place we're at.
Do you think he could have beat Barrera 5 years earlier, lads?
No. Can you remember when Richie Wenton boxed Barrera?
I can.
And Naz boxed Wayne McCulloch. Well, that was the first close. Excuse me. That was the first close view that I'd had of Barrera, and I don't know if you can remember him. I was one of the few people who said he will beat Naz, which actually upset Naz's brother. after Barrera's, after we were in Atlantic City, I said publicly that Barrera will beat Naz, and that's when Naz was top of his game. There were only a few people in Britain, I think Barry Wiggins, one or two other fighters. But anyway, I said Barrera will beat Naz, and that was then. And unless Naz had come back and beat Barrera, I don't think anything would have changed.
Well, that's the proof, Glyn. You know, at the end of the day, he lost. But
yeah,
I don't think that's Naseem Hamed in the ring, and I don't think Barrera last 2 rounds with him is best. But that's my opinion.
Interesting,
honestly.
Yeah, I
rounds.
understand that. I understand, but you could say that weren't the Naz that we know, and on his day, he would have beat him, and on his day. Listen, on my day, on your day, on everybody's day, you can always say that. You can only beat the guy
100%.
on your day. And on
What's
the
your
day,
take, John?
Naz didn't perform, and he got beat by the better fighter on the night.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you think an earlier Naz could have beat Barrera, John?
I kind of trust in what Glyn's saying. For me, I always believe, might be a bit naive, that if he'd have stopped with Brendan and he'd have listened and his weight had been right, I think it'd have been quite a messy fight, and I think he'd have beat Barrera. I don't think he'd have wiped him out. I don't think that'd have been, but I think he'd have just started to get to him. His timing was way off. If you watch the fight back, it looked shocking. He's missing him. He was just drained at weight, I think.
Everything were wrong. Can you remember the documentary that they did?
Oh, it was terrible. That was an hatchet job on himself, in that.
Yeah.
Hatchet job on himself.
He made himself look stupid.
Yeah.
And everything went wrong. Everything, from the gloves to the training camp to everything went wrong. But again, you know, you can only do what you can do on the night.
You can only see what happened, can't you? He lost. And that's it.
Yeah.
And I believe that documentary, as they were making it, they didn't know it was going to be the story of the first loss and the big humbling. I guess they were in progress making it, obviously, and it ended up becoming the story it became, which was Prince Naseem Hamed brought down to earth again, you know.
Yeah. It was a mess. At that time, you know, his relationship with Brendan and every, you know, however he boxed and just managed to fight, I don't know, because it was a mess around that time.
Yep.
And if you watch that documentary, it's quite embarrassing at one point where it says, you know, Barrera's training up in the mountains, and here I am. I think he was in Crosby's house or something.
Yeah. Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Yeah,
very
that
sad.
Talking about gloves, weren't it?
Yeah, everything. Yeah, everything that night went wrong.
Yeah.
So much has been made then of essentially the rift between Naz and Brendan, which sadly never got healed. And by the way, I'm going to tell you, Glyn, the other lads will know, there's a scene in the movie where they have this reconciliation, but it turns out to be not real. And then
Naz looked that, didn't it? Naz looked that as well.
It's basically a scene when they go backstage or a dressing room, a promotion that they're both attending, and they have this heart-to-heart, airing their grievances, but saying, but nobody, I thank you so much for what you did for me, and I will always value your contribution to my life, and vice versa. And that, I can't remember if they hug, but it's a very conciliatory conversation. Then it kind of does that kind of thing that movies do, where it shows you that didn't happen. That's like a what-if scenario, and there they are still sitting frostily apart from one another in the crowd. But so people have spoke about this rift, you know, and a lot of it hinges on this supposed 25% thing where Brendan said, and I've seen interviews where he said that he expects 25% from any of his fighters. You know, he trains and manages the vast majority of them. You know, wears both hats. And much is made also of the fact that he supposedly made a pact with like an 11 or 12-year-old Naseem Hamed, saying, "You're going to make 14 million quid, and I want 10 million of it." Your thoughts in any order that you choose to come in?
Well, obviously, Esham's running his own gym. I kind of like take it with a bit of pinch of salt when Brendan's allegedly said to Naz as an 11-year-old kid, because, you know, there's kids in my gym, and Esham, you'll have kids, and I've said half joking to him, you know, when you're world champion, you better look after me, that kind of thing. Yeah. It's tongue in cheek. It's you know, I've got a kid in the gym tonight, and I've said it to him. I said, you know, when you're world champion, kind of like you better look after me kind of thing. And I can imagine Brendan saying that, knowing Brendan as I knew him. I can imagine Brendan saying that. Naz is an 11-year-old kid taking it as gospel. I don't know. I'm not sure about that.
For me, Ben, I 100% believe that happened because Brendan come in the gym and had us all in the gym always saying, when you're on 400 quid, I'm on 100, 4 grand, 40 grand, 10 grand. He used to go through it all. I believe that happened, but that's a serious safeguarding issue if he's done that. And I believe he did do that, but it would have been an issue back then. But yeah, I can't stand up for Brendan because I'm a Brendan man. But that was a safeguarding issue. Seriously.
For
But
me,
it's like Johnny
no, but
said on Johnny's recent interview, he actually said, you know, why did they not negotiate? You know, Brendan could have said, I want X amount, and Naz says no. And why didn't they like meet in the middle somewhere? So it could have solved a lot of problems if they'd just negotiated.
Correctly though, Glyn, the split wasn't about the money in the end because he was paying him a certain amount, 75 grand.
For fight.
Principle.
And that's
Principle, innit?
John Engle was getting 30 grand a fight, so he was on a good amount. That's good money, isn't it? 3-4 times.
I think, Ish, towards the end, I just think Brendan had had enough.
He'd had enough. And the way Brendan is, he's stubborn.
Yeah.
And I've sat down with Brendan and he called me his best pal, mate, 30 times. I don't know if he said it to everybody else, I don't know, but he said it to me. And he meant what he said to me, I thought. But he spoke to me about loads of stuff that I couldn't even tell you, like. But just, you know, I don't believe it was the money why they split in the end. I believe he just...
I think Brendan
was
just had enough.
Weren't it, with Brendan? It was principle, respect, integrity,
respect.
loyalty.
When he was stubborn, when that was it, that was it. Do you know what I mean?
I remember the McCulloch fight. I remember that Naz was not listening to him in the corner and he wouldn't sit down in the corner.
Yeah.
And at one point later in the fight, initially Brendan is swallowing it and being like, oh, well, whatever. And then at some point, it's like the 10th or 11th round interval, whatever. And then Brendan says to him, for Christ's sake, will you sit down? You know, it was almost quite a funny moment.
He did, didn't he?
But we were in Atlantic City at the same time because, like I said, Richie boxed Barrera. And when we got there, we arrived in the hotel a few week before or something, and there was still a lot of training needing doing. So Naz had set up a gym in the hotel. So we went down to the gym and we said to the guy on the door, "Can we use the gym? You know, whatever time. If Naz is training at 1 o'clock, we'll train at 3 o'clock." And I saw the guy later on. He says, "Oh, Naz says you can't use the gym." I says, "Are you serious?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "It's just for Mr. Hammer's use only." I says, "So here we are, a load of guys from Sheffield, and he's telling us we can't use the gym." So I asked him again the next day. I said, "Did you speak to Naz?" And he says, "Yeah." He says, "No, you can't use the gym." And I thought, "You little shit." So we ended up
Richie went and told me that on Sunday night. Richie went and called me up because he was annoyed at some of the things Naz had said.
Well, we ended up with, there were me, Richie went, and Danny Romero. We had to jump in the minibus and drive down to Atlantic City Police Athletic Gym and finish off training there because Naz wouldn't let us train in the gym that they set up in the hotel for him. So you just think to yourself, you know, I haven't got an axe to grind against Naz, but he doesn't do himself no favors sometimes. I just think what he should do now, you know, he should put his hands up occasionally and say, you know what? Yeah, I was a young kid then. Yeah, I made a lot of mistakes. Same as myself. You know, I fell out with Brendan. But come on, let's try and mend a few things here.
He said he wanted to go to the funeral. He said he wanted to go to the funeral, but he was made clear that he wasn't welcome.
Ben, the one thing I couldn't understand is the night before the funeral, I'd made friends with Brendan. I'd gone down to the gym. Amir Khan, he started to go out. I made friends with Brendan. We shook hands. It was great. We had a good chat in the gym. Dominic stopped everybody training, explained, you know, there were a time I would walk in that gym, I'd know everybody, but on this occasion, I think the only people I knew in the gym were Killer and Kel. So Dominic stopped everybody training, told everybody, you know, my history with Brendan. We had a good chat and it was nice.
Yeah.
Brendan were ill at the time, but we still had a good chat. We talked about putting the girders in and all the good old days and whatever. So it was nice. And then I found out, well, the night before the funeral, I got a text from Brendan's daughter saying, you know, my mum don't want you at the funeral, which I was devastated about. And then I heard that Naz weren't invited and neither were Bomber, which I really thought, you know, it really upset me when you think about it.
So all three of you were told
All
you shouldn't
three
be
of
there.
them, yeah. We never got, we were told not to show up, whatever, which I thought were bad, mainly because people like me and Bomber, we were the down there when Brendan were a pioneer. And like I said, I'd buried the hatchet with Brendan. I got best thing I ever did meeting Brendan Engle. Yeah, we had this fallout. So when I got the text to say you're not welcome at the funeral, I was quite shocked. And then when I found out Naz weren't going either and Bomber, I thought, you know what? I don't know. It really upset me that a lot.
That's interesting. I didn't know that extended, that non-invitation
The
extended to the three of you.
story I heard, Glyn, and it was in the film actually. I didn't learn it until the film come out. They said that the reason your guys didn't come, I don't know about you, but Naz, was because Brendan wouldn't want you to come. That's what they said on the film. Can you remember that, Ben?
I can,
I
yeah,
can't
and because they called the Harold Graham character Harry, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, they did. And Glyn, because you haven't seen it, he's not really featured. He's just implied. And then at some point, Alma's looking out the window. It's from her POV. And Brendan is arguing with a shadowy black guy who's got a kit bag or whatever, and who has a row, then gets off into his car, then leaves. And Brendan comes back, or Piers Brosnan comes back saying, after all I did for him, the ungrateful shite or whatever. So they call him Harry, not Harold. I don't know why.
Harry Graham. Well,
Yeah.
the other thing that upset me,
we always had
one of the
lectures.
things that upset me about the funeral and people turning up at the funeral, when I was boxing amateur at Brendan's, he actually got banned. St. Thomas's got banned by the ABA because back in them days, you couldn't train amateurs and professionals at the time. And there's quite a lot of people in Sheffield who were part of getting Brendan actually banned. Anyway, when I look at the pictures of the funeral, some of these people were professing to be Brendan's best mate, and I'm thinking, hang on a minute, 25 years ago, you were the guys who got him banned by the ABA, and now here you are at his funeral telling everybody what great friends of his you are. So, I don't know, it's just a bit strange to see these people at the funeral and certain other people not there who probably should. I'd like to have gone to pay my respects to Brendan. I owe Brendan a lot, so I would have liked to have gone to his funeral, but it's what it is.
John, you were trying to say something just back then, mate.
No, I was saying we all had the lectures, like every week about what happened with Errol, and the loyalty and everything in front of Naz through the Naz years, and then after Naz had gone, you know what I mean? It was the same all time. Turn the radio off, stop the bag swinging. You know what I mean? And you knew that you were going to be stood there for 3/4 of an hour, like getting a lecture on what had happened, and you know all that 25%.
Every day, Keith, wasn't it? Every day about Errol, every day about Naz.
Yeah. The rat, the little rat.
Yeah, he did slag them off, like he did slag them off. And
what do you? Because Johnny Nelson said, because Naz said it's sad, but with Brendan it was all about money. And Johnny Nelson said, no, it wasn't. He said he lived the most humblest existence. He said he lived in the same house, 26 Newman Road, or was it, or something like that. He said he drove the same car forever. So would you agree that he wasn't money motivated primarily?
From me, I'd say definitely not. It was principle, loyalty, and he just, you know, if Alma brought him a new coat, he'd go mental. He says, "You bought me a bleeding new coat. I don't need a coat. I've got a coat." You know what I mean? He wouldn't. He says, "What do you need to go abroad for?" He says, "You've got a swimming pool here in Sheffield and blah blah blah." And it would never. It weren't flash. He didn't. But the principle about it, if you owed him 15 quid, he wanted 15 quid. He didn't want £14.50. He wanted 15 quid. You know what I mean? He'd give you that. If you give him the 15 quid, an hour later, give you the 15 quid back. But for me, is my opinion, it was the principle of you paying him that money. and bite, like he used to wipe your lips, pay what you owe, basically. Pay your subs, so you can't run the place. And if you paid your subs and then you said, Brendan, I'm skint, he'd say, come on, don't say nothing to nobody, and you get money back. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
for me, it was the principle, the loyalty, and the respect. You know.
For me, a little bit different, John. For me,
Go on then.
yeah, for me, a bit different to that. I can only go by my own experiences. When I first got to Brendan, he says, "What are you in boxing for?" I said, "I want to become champ, Bren." He says, "No, you're not. You're in it for that." And then he says, "Look, I'll get 25% of what you earn. Do you agree with that?" And he shook his hand. So he was in it for the money for me. For me, he was in it for the money. Now, he was not flash. He was not flash. He never had flash cars. He never had flash things. All the money was in the bank, as John and Dominic said. I heard Dominic on an interview the other day with Boxing King Media, and he saved all his money, but he wanted his money. He wanted his money what he wanted. You know, I always paid him 25% of every pay packet I had when I was champion to when I was starting out, and that was the deal. But I just believe that it was about money for Brendan.
Yeah,
Don't get me wrong, he did amazing things, and a lot of things he did for free. With the kids stuff he did, you couldn't pay him. There's some of the stuff he did in that gym for kids, you know, for people that don't deserve his time. The things he did, mate, was worth a fortune, an absolute fortune. But for me, the boxing was about the money, and it is for Dominic Engle as well. That's what I believe.
Glyn?
Yeah. When I started with Brendan, 1976, he was still working on a building site. You know, he'd come home, 75, 76, he'd come home from work with his work boots on. And, you know, like I say, he was just a labourer. It didn't, boxing in Sheffield for Brendan didn't take off until many years later. And I think what it was, back then he was a working class bloke, went to work. And, you know, I don't think he ever wanted to go back to being that person again. And so he ended up being very, very careful with his money. You know, like I said, I used to see him coming in from work after doing a shift on the flats that he built on Newman Road, just labouring and digging holes. And so I can understand him never wanting to go back to that, because I've been in that position myself. You don't want to go back to that. So that's why I think Brendan was very, very careful with money. And like I say, if you owed him a tenner, he wanted his tenner. But then, like John just said, if you asked him for something in other ways, he was very, very generous.
So he was thrifty rather than greedy, essentially.
Yeah. Whatever thrifty means, that's good.
Yeah. Bit of shade of Muhammad Ali there, Glyn.
Greedy. I wouldn't. No way was he greedy, but he wanted his money what he was owed. He was never greedy, and he was a very generous man. If anything, not so much in financial, but in, you know, he'd give you anything. You know, he wasn't so much financial, but he was some man anyway.
What about the other fella?
Dominic and John same.
Sorry, John.
I find Dominic and John same. Like I had my arguments in past, but when they've explained, you know what I mean, and they broke it down. I'm not good with figures, and they break it down. You know what I mean. Dominic's very generous. But the principle of what they want, you know what I mean. It's like you can't change that. If they said they want 20 quid, you can't say, well, I'll tell you what, I'll give you 18 quid. No, you give me 20 quid. And that's what I say. And afterwards, if you say I'm skint and blah, 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 they'll, you know, in my experience, they'd either give you the money or whatever.
You know, Glyn, you know, if I said I went to Denmark 15 times, at least, and come back with 1,000 quid, on my own, Johnny Breedle, Spender Bazet, another guy who boxed Ricky out, and I went at least 15 times.
Yeah.
And I've come back and I've given them 25% of that money every time. That was the deal. But
Because he got you the job.
that fair?
That's what he says.
Yeah.
He says, I got you the job. So without me getting you the job, you wouldn't have got that money.
I've been over there on my own for 2 weeks, and I'm not exaggerating, at least 15 times. I've come back and I've given the 25% in cash every time. So, and I had no problem in doing that. But when I look back, I think, I don't know, I'm not sure about that one. What do you reckon?
Would you take money from a fighter you manage, Glyn, for sparring?
Pardon?
If a fighter you manage is making money as a sparring partner, would you take a cut?
Ben, everything depends. What I like to do with my fighters in my gym, and you can ask any of them, it's black and white. Everything's got to be black and white, because if you have a grey area, that's when you start falling out. You know, I remember once boxing and Brendan paid me my wages, whatever, and he wrote down what had been stopped and whatever. And at the bottom, it said VAT. Well, at the time, I didn't have a clue what VAT was. And I said, Brendan, what's this VAT? And he said to me, he says, don't worry about it. You can claim it back at the end of the year. And so I walked away and I thought, it was nothing. But you can only claim it back if you're VAT registered.
Yeah.
I thought, like things like that. I'm thinking, you know, I don't know. Listen, with me, I try and do everything in the gym black and white. Anything to do with money, it's got to be black and white. Otherwise, people end up falling out. You know, I don't want anybody thinking that I'm ripping anybody off. If that's what you're getting, that's what you're getting, and that's it.
Yeah.
Where else you gonna get 300 quid?
Yeah.
I know
sparring.
you can eat everything you can eat. You take. Listen, we've all had some great. Listen, I wouldn't change a thing. I had some like you, Esham. I've travelled all over the world with just me and Brendan. I boxed all over there, but Italy twice, Switzerland. I had some great times with Brendan. And when you're travelling around places like that all over the world, you sit down and you talk about everything from you name it. And so when you fall out later on for whatever reason, it's a little bit sad, because you know I've had it myself. You've had it, Esham. You know, I've got guys who've left my gym, gone to other gyms, kids who so-called like stabbed you in the back, and you just think it absolutely guts you. So I can understand Brendan more now than when I could when I were actually boxing for him, because one of the things that Brendan used to say, as you guys will know, Esham and John, I've seen it all before, and I find myself these days saying a lot of things to my fighters that Brendan used to say to me back then. But back then it didn't make sense.
Having the practical experience that you're having, the practical experience now. That's how you're learning.
Yeah, of course it is. But
I never fell out with Brendan. Never fell out with Brendan. You know what I mean?
So what about the other guy, Prince Naseem Hamed? Did he become something else as he got more successful and more famous and wealthier? Did his character change in a significant way?
No, God, yeah.
What a time to go on.
I didn't see that.
It was like, to me, it's like somebody who don't suit alcohol. I come up with this other day. So you get two people. One can drink alcohol and be okay. It'll be all smiley and laughing. He won't fall out with you. The other person can drink alcohol. It'll be an absolute nightmare. It'll be violent and blah blah blah, nasty. Well, Naz with money were the same as somebody. Yeah, as soon as he got the money. I mean, I can remember Naz being absolutely fantastic. I love being around him. And then I actually fell out with Naz for the first time. He used to, because I was a mechanic, my trade was a mechanic at the time. He used to ask me about cars and different cars and what car to get and blah, blah, blah. And he come to me one day. He used to let me drive all his cars, and he got a Mitsubishi Evo, which were an import. And he says, Keith, I've got this right car. He says, I'm going to gear driving it. And I was so excited. And he says, I'll bring it to the gym tomorrow. He comes to the gym next day in a Bentley. So I had a bit of banter with him saying, where's this Evo, blah, blah, blah. That went on for a couple of days. On the third day, probably my fault, I ended up having a bit of go at him. I said, I went, are you bullshitting about this, Evo, or what? You're supposed to be giving me a go in this car. And he spun round at me. And I'm telling you, in front of everybody in gym, there were some people who I didn't know in gym. And they were like, who the fuck are you talking to me like that? I fucking throw you a bit of fucking corn. You know what I mean? Like, I'm actually like doing you a favor. I'm like, Naz, I'm only messing. And they were like, fuck off. You know what I mean? He says, don't ask me again. And I was like, are you joking? You know what I mean? I went, we've been mates for fucking ages and you're going to treat me like that. And that's how they were. And that was it. Like, that was last time, basically, I gave him any time at all.
Really?
And,
Well, what year was that? What year would that have been, John?
Well, he got a Bentley. That can't be long before he left gym.
Yeah.
It weren't long before he...
98-ish.
A bit after that, because he had a Subaru. Yeah, he had a Subaru first, and I've got a picture of that Subaru on my drive, and that was a R-Reg 98, and he got the Evo probably about 6 months later, so it will have been 98. Yeah, that's right.
When you think, John, how many of them from the gym is he actually talking to now? Obviously, Tommy died, didn't he? But who is he? Because Johnny doesn't.
Annis,
but I'm not sure he's that good with him, mate. Because I spoke to him.
I don't know. I mean, Tom died, obviously, we're at Tom's funeral. That was last time I saw Naz.
They was close.
Yeah, they were
sad,
really
isn't it? It's
close.
very, very sad. You know, like I said, you look back at the whole picture. And
Ryan was close with Naz, wasn't he? Ryan
and Rhodes and Naz were like brothers, weren't they? They seemed to be.
Yeah, it's sad, isn't it? It's really sad. But hey, he doesn't do himself no favours. You know, one of the things I said to a lot of people in Sheffield is he could be such a good ambassador for boxing in Sheffield. If he just like, I don't know, if he just did a little bit of something, turned up at an amateur show, presented trophies, you know, showed his face. But when's the last time you saw him at an amateur show in Sheffield? He'll turn up to the big shows.
Yeah.
He's always there at the big shows. But he doesn't do himself any favours, I don't think.
Maybe he don't want to. He might have no empathy at all. He might not be bothered.
Well, it don't matter about that. And he should give back, John. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, even if he's once a year, just go to a small-time amateur show, one of his old clubs, or, you know, give him back.
Yeah, I've always said that. There's a lot of people in this game and all they do is take, and never give anything back. Like I say, when's the last time you saw Naz at a show in Sheffield, a little amateur show at Shire Green or
Why not?
Never.
Couldn't he do
And
that?
just to turn up and do that, do you know how good that would make kids feel?
That's where he started.
Yeah, he's forgot where he come from, tell you the truth. He forgets that, you know, he came from a corner shop on Newman Road, and it's a very, very sad, I don't know, it's very, very sad, I think.
I mean, Brendan said he used to. There's a book by a guy called Jeffrey Beattie called Off the Ropes, I think it's called.
Yeah.
And it charts a whole period of history from those Winkerbank gym days. And he's obviously he's obviously accompanying Brendan in the gym and observing and making notes. And one night, when Naz is already famous and already a world champion, he says to the kids, listen, little Naseem Hamed, who grew up just, 30 yards from here or whatever, he did it. He took over, the world, and you can do it too. And he used him as an example. That was his inspirational model, was the fact that a local lad had been able to achieve as much as he had, and there's no reason why they couldn't too,
Yeah, it's a great story. Like I say, I've not seen the movie yet. It's a great story. It's a success story. So like I said, I don't know, but I lost a lot of respect for Naz even as a kid when I used to hear him speaking to Brendan. One of the things that he always used to refer to Brendan as was Paddy. And I used to think, you cheeky little shit, who are you talking to?
What did he used to call him, John? Brenda. I hated that.
So,
I hated it.
like when I remember hearing him saying to Brendan, call him Brendan Paddy. me, John, you'd have never said it to Brendan.
No.
Esham, you won. And me as a kid, I met Brendan at 16. I stayed there while I was 33. I'd have never have ever said to Brendan, "Hey, Paddy, what you doing, Paddy?" It's a disrespectful thing.
Yeah.
But I remember hearing Naz call Brendan Paddy and being very, very disrespectful towards him. And I used to think, why is he being like that? And then I also thought to myself, why is Brendan putting up with it? Because I won't let one of my fighters talk to me like that.
That's why.
Golden Goose, the Golden Goose.
Maybe. So I don't know, but
I just think, fellas. Go on, Glyn, keep going.
I just think there comes a time when you have to put your hands up and say, now, yeah, I was wrong, or I wish I'd done it wrong. But he's not. Even now, he's still trying to justify his actions. And he's got a lot of enemies in Sheffield. I'm not going to tell you what sort of things have gone up. He needs to put his hands up and grow up hairballs and just say, you know what? Yeah, I wear a little shit. Yeah, I did that wrong. I shouldn't have done that, and blah, blah, blah. Because there's a lot of things that he needs to apologise to people in Sheffield for. And I think we all know what them are.
You ain't going to do that, Glyn.
I know but he's not going to do that. But that's the problem. Because he doesn't think he's done anything wrong.
And that's about personal connections, Glyn. I also feel that the British public at large doesn't love him because of the things I alluded to earlier. The fall from grace, and obviously the imprisonment didn't help, and a lot of people got a bad taste about that. Yeah. But I think, like I say, I think he really needed a second act to be loved. I mean, you had your caveat that unless he'd have beat Barrera, you don't see what a difference it would have made. But you look how much Chris Eubank was loved almost when he came back losing to the likes of Carl Thompson and Joe Kazagi. That Eubank was suddenly loved and embraced because we saw him as a trier and a man of dignity who knew how to lose with a plume and class as well. So
that's English. I think that's an English thing. It's a British thing. If if they can come back gracefully, like lose gracefully and come back, I think people. I don't know. It's a British thing. They kind of hold them in esteem. I don't know.
I think that's a good word, Ben, that you just mentioned. Then dignity.
Yeah.
I think that having a bit of dignity that means a lot to a lot of people.
Yeah. Well. Let me ask one last question to the two of you that have seen the movie at this point. Knowing Brendan, being as close to him as you were, knowing him as you did, and Glyn could probably answer this too because he might have seen clips. When you were watching the movie, John, did you feel did Pierce Brosnan become Brendan for you? Was it fully convincing, and were you able to suspend that disbelief? Yeah.
Well, I went to Bermontoft's gym because I did like the bit parts. I were in the film a little bit, and when I heard and saw Piers doing the actual sets before it even got put on film, it made back of my hairs on back of my neck stand up, and
That's the acid test.
I was like, God, he's got the walk, he's got everything what he's doing. You know what I mean? And I thought it was good. The accent was a little bit off. A little bit, like people said, I can't even do an Irish accent, but like, I mean, there were twinges in it, but he did everything. He arched his back, same as Brendan. He walked, same as Brendan. For me, he did it. It was good.
Shug,
I thought he did a brilliant job. Same as again. I mean, I enjoyed the film, and I thought he did a brilliant job, and he's a brilliant actor. But for me, knowing Brendan, it wasn't good enough for me. But like I said, I'm not being critical. It's just the way I knew Brendan and the way it was with me and the way it was with the people. He didn't quite hit it, but he did an amazing job.
And as for the Naseem Hamed portrayal, what did you make of that? Back to you, John.
I thought it was quite good, me. I thought it was a little bit big. I think you've wrote that. I think it was a little bit big, and some moves, as you know, as a boxer, when you watch a boxing film, you think, what are they doing, man? But
it looked like Sony PlayStation, John. It looked like Sony. Those videos, they put on YouTube of PlayStation figures boxing each other. It looked
Yeah.
like that to me.
Yeah, there were twinges in it where I thought is that's how Naz would have moved, you know what I mean? But all in all, no, I don't
No.
think so.
Can I just,
Sure.
Ben,
Go
can
on,
I just
Glyn.
jump in with this one?
Go on.
Because we all three of us spent so long with Brendan, we've all got mannerisms and we can all recite one or two things. But the person that I think should have played the part of Brendan is John Keaton, because John Keaton can do the greatest impression of Brendan Engle ever, which he did when we had a party, a 30-year anniversary for our gym. Sheffield Boxing Centre has been going 30 years. And I got John up. There were a lot of people there from the past, and Bomber were there and everybody. And John actually got in on stage and did his own impersonation of Brendan Engle, and it was absolutely amazing. Well done, John.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Thanks.
I can believe that too.
Yeah.
Fellas, we've been at this for an hour. On that note, if anybody has a burning desire to say something that hasn't been said so far on the show, then the floor is yours. If that's not the case, it's been wonderful to get an audience with you. It's been one of the best shows that I've ever done, I think. Certainly, we've had the biggest live audience constantly staying around. I can see from the figures in the top left-hand corner. It must be you guys, because it can't be me, can it? Because I'm always here. So, Glyn, Rhodes, thank you very much. We'll speak soon, no doubt. And I must get around to reading your book, which would tell me a lot more about this we've been discussing tonight, no doubt. John, especially pleased to talk to you properly face to face after years of good relations on Facebook. And Shug,
Just
Shug,
want to
always a
say
pleasure.
one more thing, Ben. So all I want to say is that I really hope there'll be a follow-up from that movie. You know, maybe from somebody else, or I really hope that there's some more episodes to it. I think he's got space for that.
In closing, Naz said he wants to do a documentary now to put his slant on it in his reply, and he says that Mark Wahlberg is interested in working with him on the documentary.
That'll be totally biased, though. But yeah, it'd be nice to see somebody else's. Naz's as well, yeah, why not? But you know, maybe somebody else. I think it's got space and potential for more movies like Rockies. You know what I mean? Obviously a different outlook, but I think it's got potential.
It's a great story.
Space.
It's a great
Okay,
story.
gentlemen, when I press the end button here, that'll say goodbye to the audience. We can still say goodbye privately backstage if you care to do that. So hang around for a second. Guys, those of you tuned in, thank you very much. This has been a great way to come back to the live podcast, which I haven't done for several weeks now. I will endeavour to be more consistent in future, especially if I can get quality boxing gentlemen like this on the show all the time. Be lucky, keep punching. Next time. See you soon.